Supercars and the Gen 3 machines are gearing up to head south this weekend for the second round of the championship in Melbourne. Welcome to my round preview for the Grand Prix from a Supercars perspective. I'm going to cover all you need to know about the track, the key headlines, and even throw out some of my own predictions as we gear up for a big weekend. Albert Park is the battleground, and despite officially being another street circuit, this place couldn't be any more different to Newcastle, where Supercars have just come from. It's a clockwise circuit, about 2.6 kilometers in length, with 12 turns, and thanks to the runoff areas and the gravel traps, I'd class the risk rating around here as medium, but make no mistake, this place is one of the fastest Supercars go on their calendar. The lap starts with a very wide run into turn 1, a right-left sequence of corners which takes them onto a short straight and down to one of the key overtaking opportunities at turn 3. Those battles normally continue through turns 4 and 5 before they get to the recently reprofiled section of the racetrack, sort of really starting at turn 6. Really quick corner here that leads them onto a nice big flat out section. Formula 1 are going to have DRS cruising through here, but Supercars just hang on for dear life before we get to the famous left-right flick through the back chicane here at Albert Park. And then towards the end of the lap, some more key overtaking opportunities through the final sequence of corners, which are very tight but gradually open up and lead them back onto the main straight. If you are heading trackside or just haven't seen Supercars race around this layout before, I would say there are 4 main spots to watch. The first one is that run into turn 1. It's an absolute pinch point on the opening lap for Supercars especially, but even after lap 1, if you do survive the opening lap carnage, you often see lots of drivers outbraking themselves into turn 1 because you can run through the gravel and get away with it. Yeah, you lose some time, but it's one of the areas of the track that the drivers tend to get a little bit greedy, and we usually see a lot of action as a result. Turn 3 is my second spot to watch because it is one of those key overtaking opportunities, but also you often see a lot of really cool racecraft through here as cars go side by side and try different switchbacks and just try to get the upper hand on their opponent. By turn 5, they've pretty much got to get back in single file, so it's always interesting to see how the battles get resolved through here. Turn 5 also gets its own special mention. This one was actually completely off my radar until last year, but we saw lots of incidents here last year, single car accidents as well, with drivers going off in qualifying by themselves, and also incidents throughout the races, which resulted in a whole lot of damage. So it'll be interesting to see if that one continues with the new Gen 3 regulations. And then my final spot to watch is turn 13, another key overtaking opportunity for Supercars. This one here I think actually helps Supercars more than it has Formula 1 for overtaking with those recent track changes, but yeah, as I said, one to watch, especially as they go side by side in the back part of the lap. Let's wind the clock back and take a look at what happened last time Supercars were around the streets of Albert Park. We had 4 races last year, like we're going to see this year, with Mostert taking 2 of the victories and Van Gisbergen taking the rest. We saw some pretty high profile clashes as well. We saw Waters run into the back of Davidson into turn 3. We also saw Mostert collide with James Courtney in a really big way, and Heimgartner also took some pretty serious damage in the last corner as well. And the big talking point in terms of the cars was the laminated tires. We saw quite a few blowouts, lots of blistering, lots of issues with the Dunlop rubber, and this year they're using that same compound again, so it's going to be interesting to see if they still suffer those issues with the Gen 3 machines. Okay, let's turn our attention to 2023 with a look at this weekend's format, and hold on to your socks because this is really quite different compared to what we're used to at a standard Supercars event. And before we get into it, I should also flag that I've gone a bit rogue with my race numbering. Supercars cascade their race numbers as the year goes on, so technically the Thursday race is race 3 of the championship, Friday's race 4, and so on and so on. I find that numbering system really hard to follow as you get into the back half of the season, so in my round previews and reviews, I'm actually going to call them as they appear that weekend. So Thursday's race 1 of the weekend, Friday's race 2, you get the idea. I find this a lot easier to follow, and hopefully you do as well. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get into it. Thursday is going to be the busiest day for Supercars with practice 1 and 2, and also qualifying for races 1 and 2 of the weekend. That day is going to finish up with our first race, which will be 19 laps, and I'm very excited to have Supercars action so early in the week. But on Friday, we've just got one Supercars session, a race of 15 laps in length. Things pick up on Saturday with qualifying for races 3 and 4, and then of course race 3 itself that afternoon, which will go for 13 laps. On Sunday, we have the final session for Supercars race 4, which will see the drivers have 14 tours around the Albert Park circuit before the Grand Prix. As for the weather, we're expecting temperatures around the sort of high teens to early 20s across all 4 days, and that's in degrees Celsius, that is. We're expecting a partly cloudy day on Thursday with the risk of showers on Friday and Saturday, with another partly cloudy day on Sunday to round the weekend out. Big disclaimer here though, I am recording this on a Monday evening, so there's plenty of time for things to change, and this is Melbourne. Weather forecasts are practically useless in that part of the world. If you're going trackside, pack everything. Pack board shorts and a singlet, but also pack a trench coat and an umbrella. You just never know what you're going to get around Albert Park. What were the key headlines between Newcastle and today's video? Well, Triple Eight's Newcastle disqualification appeal was rejected. They finished 1-2 on the racetrack on Saturday in Newcastle, but were later disqualified for a technical infringement. They appealed that decision, Triple Eight that is, but it was ultimately rejected. So the history books are going to show that Cam Waters picked up that victory, and it has big championship implications. So I'm sure Red Bull are going to be looking to bounce back strong this weekend. And if their on-track performance is anything to go by, I think they've certainly got the pace to do so. Wheels have been a key sticking point for Gen 3, pun intended, with wheel nuts getting cross-threaded or wheels just not going on due to heat expansion. So they had a few issues with that in Newcastle. Fortunately, they were covered by fuel, so they were able to take their time putting the wheels on. But in the AGP this weekend, they are not using fuel in the pit stop, so it's all going to be about getting those wheels on and off as quickly as possible. Fortunately, some work has been done to improve the wheel situation, and I'll link a video down from Brad Jones Racing in the description who showed some of the changes that have been made and hopefully solve the issues we saw in Newcastle. Then finally, and arguably the biggest headline, GM have announced they are axing the road-going Camaro for the foreseeable future. This was really big news, not really surprising news. A lot of us have been expecting it for a long time now, but it is awkward timing with Supercars just launching their new era of race car. A little bit awkward. I'm sure they would have liked that announcement to come a few months, if not a year down the road, but they are going to continue racing the Camaro in Supercars, I believe, up until at least 2025. This news has a lot of details that I'd love to get into, but I don't want to bog down today's Melbourne preview, so I'll likely swing back round to this one and share some of my thoughts on this in a dedicated video sometime shortly after the Grand Prix. A few on-track notes to look out for this weekend. The Supercars races are a bit shorter this year due to the presence of Formula 2 and Formula 3 at the Australian Grand Prix, but a few days ago the Supercars races were actually announced to be extended by a few laps. They're still shorter than they were last year, but still a bit more laps than they were initially planned to be. Tyres are another big talking point going into this weekend. The Supercars are going to be using a mix of super soft and hard tyres throughout every single race with a compulsory pit stop to switch them over. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the strategy plays out, and also if we see more tyre issues this year like we did in 2022. The cars don't have as much downforce, which might take some of the pressure off and reduce some of those blowouts we saw, but at the same time they're going to be sliding around a lot more as well, so it's going to be really interesting to see how the tyre dynamics play out. Then finally, this, in my opinion, and I know for a lot of people, is the first real big test for Gen 3. This is a far wider circuit compared to Newcastle. You can do a lot more side-by-side action around here as well, and have battles continue for multiple corners, which I think a lot of us are really hoping to see. Newcastle was pretty tame overall, especially on the Saturday, so I'm really hoping we get some amazing racing this weekend. And Supercars in Melbourne last year were pretty darn exciting, so they've got a lot to live up to, but fingers crossed Gen 3 really delivers around this fast-flowing circuit. Let's start wrapping this preview up with some predictions from my side. Now, don't take these too seriously. These are just a bit of fun, Just an opportunity for me to throw something out there and then be all smug in the round review if any of them come true. But my first prediction, and it's an unfortunate one, I'm predicting a crash on the back section of the circuit, the really fast area that's been changed in recent years. Supercars were barely hanging on through here last year. We got some really close calls actually with cars sliding out to the concrete wall. I've got a horrible feeling we might see a big smash there this year. I hope not, but yeah, got a gut feeling there. So fingers crossed, I'm going to cancel that one out as something that didn't happen. Second prediction is that we're going to see a bounce back from Dick Johnson Racing. They had a horrid start to Gen 3 in Newcastle. Let's try and be a bit more specific there. I'm going to predict at least one podium for DJR over the course of the weekend. That's what we're going to require to tick that box. And then I'm going to say there's going to be at least 3 different winners from the 4 races. It's a bit optimistic, but fingers crossed we see that kind of variety. And that was actually the subject of my poll of the week. I asked you guys to make some predictions on how many different drivers you think will get the victory this weekend. 86 people voted. A big thank you to all those that did vote. 12% of those think one driver will win every single race. The majority, 51%, believe that 2 drivers will win races this weekend. 33% think 3 different drivers will get a race win, and only 5% think we will see a different driver win every single race. A very quick plug from me, if you do want to take part in polls like this one, and I do try to feature the results in the majority of my videos, please do not only consider subscribing, but to like and comment on my stuff when it is released, whether that's a video or a community post. YouTube sadly doesn't push everything to everyone, even if you're subscribed, so those little interactions not only help my channel grow, but they actually increase the chance YouTube will share this kind of stuff with you in the future. Big thank you for your support as always, and let's start wrapping this up with a look at the support categories this weekend. I use that term loosely because Supercars is technically the support category this weekend, but in terms of other track action, we're going to see the Porsche Carrera Cup, Formula 3, Formula 2, and this other thing called Formula 1, I hear it's a big deal, but that's on this weekend as well. In terms of the championship standings, we can look at this with a bit more confidence now that Triple Eight's disqualification has been upheld. Chaz Mostert leads the way, Brody Kostecki for Erebus in second, and Cam Waters in third there. I think he's still a very big dark horse for this year's championship, if not a favourite. Davey Reynolds there in fourth, and Heimgardner also doing really well up there in fifth in the drivers. In terms of teams, we've got Erebus Motorsport leading the way, followed by Penrite and Team 18, another one of those quiet achievers. But that sets us up for Melbourne. Thank you so much for your support on the videos recently, everybody. I hope you're excited for a big weekend ahead. Obviously, we've not only got Supercars, but some international motorsport action with Formula 2, Formula 3, and of course Formula 1. I'm a big fan of F1, I was only joking earlier. So very excited for the weekend ahead. Be sure to subscribe as well if you want to see my Melbourne review video, which will be going up soon. And if you missed my Newcastle stuff, be sure to check that one out as well. But until then, enjoy the racing, and I will see you in my round review very soon.